So we're just about to start a session here. We're going to be talking about the idea of sharing cities, the platform economy, various community initiatives, and their connections to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, looking at the ways that we can kind of scale up and track the work that we're doing and be able to kind of legitimize a lot of this stuff with city governments. We're going to get going in just about a minute. So if people want to come, this is going to be a kind of a participatory discussion. So we're going to have, if people want to come a little bit closer, we're going to end up doing a few different, lower down? Okay. We're going to do a number of kind of discussion questions that we'll be going through and kind of going through, talking about this a bit. I'm going to be joined by Maurizio from Goteo as well. And we'll be kind of having a little bit of a conversation at the beginning and talk about our organizations for a moment, and then we'll get into the workshop. Going to do, well, you're going to fill in, but I was going to do a short intro. I just straight into the workshop kind of thing. But
I can fill in with the Javier project.
Yep, you're going to fill in.
Oh yeah,
you can if you want. You know,
I know.
Yeah. No, but you can just talk about that.
We financed it.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh, awesome.
Cool. It was in the Ajuntament.
Okay.
You didn't know that?
No.
You see, that's why Javier shouldn't be here. He doesn't deserve it.
Yeah. Awesome. So then we'll go through. I'll just do it about after we do our introductions, do about Shareable, kind of talk about sharing cities, going about the SDGs, and then what I was going to do is I was going to do a couple of case studies. Okay. So I was going to do one of kind of looking at car sharing and that we sent in the book, and how that just is connected. And then if you want to talk about Goteo a little bit more, you can go into Lendi and then go into the workshop. But like really, just like 5 minutes. It's going to be because the workshop's going to be most of it. Hopefully. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, I think we're going to get going.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about kind of sharing cities and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And just as a quick introduction, my name is Tom Llewellyn. I'm here with Shareable.net, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But I want to just pass it over to you to say who you are.
I'm Mauricio Bryan from Goteo.org. We're a nonprofit organization for crowdfunding and match-funding social innovation projects.
So. Just a little background on Shareable. We've been around since for almost a decade now, empowering people to share, empowering communities to share, working with city governments, doing advisement on how to enable more sharing, both kind of on the platform side, but also on the social side. We've been working with community initiatives and have offered advising and support to about 300 different community sharing initiatives around the planet. And we also run an online magazine and have published thousands of stories covering the ecosystem and watching its growth, enabling its growth. And in about 2011, we started really focusing in on cities and the role that cities can play. We hosted the first sharing economy conference in San Francisco called ShareSF, which brought together about 130 different members of various NGOs, the local government, and kind of social innovation businesses. Businesses that were just trying to get going in the sharing economy, to look at the city of San Francisco as a platform for sharing, to reimagine cities as platforms for sharing. And over the course of, since 2011, we've really been working on that a lot more. We've worked with groups that do community asset mapping in over 100 cities to map out all their sharing resources. We've worked with groups to put on sharing festivals to bring all those resources together and to connect them with their communities and to really try and scale the movement. And in 2016, we started working on a new book called Sharing Cities Activating the Urban Commons, which the guide that's sitting on all your desks is kind of an alternative introduction to. And the book looks at 137 different case studies and city policies drawn from over 80 cities in 35 countries, looking at food and housing, water, waste, energy, land, technology, governance, finance, work, kind of 11 core city sectors, and looking at the ways that both communities are rising up to meet those challenges, either through kind of community initiatives and nonprofits and businesses as well, and also looking at the ways that cities are empowering members, the residents, to participate in the direct provisioning of those core city needs. And so it's half policies and half case studies. And then more recently, just we released that book about 6 months ago. And just in the last couple of months, we've gone through and re-looked at all those case studies and policies through the lens of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, looking at the ways that these various sharing projects can go to meet to support those goals, kind of with the idea that there are so many projects that are kind of working to meet the SDGs under the radar. They often don't realize it themselves, and they're not getting the municipal kind of support recognition either through finances or other methods within the city, and are just waiting to be supported, to be elevated, scaled, and replicated. And that it can be a lot cheaper to be able to for cities to support existing initiatives than to finance new ones. So that's kind of the lens, and that's one of the things that we want to kind of focus on the talk today. And this touches into the idea of a polycentric approach to meeting and mitigating climate change. Elinor Ostrom, who was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2009 for her work around the commons and commons governance, wrote a kind of a report for the World Bank. And in her report, she found that essentially through a polycentric approach, we can reach more stakeholders, increase cooperation, and accelerate the response. And that when aggregated together, all the little things that people are doing adds up to a whole lot and can be much more impactful than top-down technocratic solutions. And so that's kind of one of the things that I'm hoping we're going to talk about today. And I just wanted to go through and do kind of just an example of how some sharing projects can meet the SDGs, and then we're going to hear a little bit about how Goteo is starting to look into this. But one of the things, and it's in the guide as well, we make this argument that we looked at car sharing, and in 2010, UC Berkeley did a study that found that for every single shared car, you can remove 13 cars off the road. So for every single car share, you can remove 13 cars off the road. And that 50% of the people that joined car shares didn't have a car before. So they were joining the car share instead of buying a car who would have otherwise bought one. And at the same time, around that same period, there was a separate study by the National Building Museum which estimated that for every 120,000 cars taken off the road, $1 billion could be kept within the local economy. So thinking about the amount of money that was going out, paying for fuel, for the production of cars, for the maintenance and all that sort of thing for those parts, once you kind of reduce all those expenses, that's that much more. $1 billion could be kept within the city. So using that, basically, car sharing can reduce resource consumption, which is SDG 11 for sustainable cities and communities, SDG 12 for responsible consumption and production, and SDG 13 for climate change, for climate action rather. You can increase access to resources, which is SDG number 1 for no poverty and number 10 for reduced inequalities, and you can keep billions of dollars in the local economy. So which is SDG number 8 for decent work and economic growth, and SDG number 9, which is industrial innovation and infrastructure. So that's just kind of one very concrete example of how sharing resources really goes to meet those goals. And now I just want to hear a little bit about kind of how Goteo is looking at this.
We have it more or less, if you've seen the presentation that we did before, our base is funding the commons, giving a chance to different projects to get funding and get community around the projects, but more in depth on how do we work with those commons. It's more the crucial and especially the most interesting part that we could bring in. And yes, I'm not, if you see the program, I'm not Javi, I'm not Lendi, yet we funded Lendi throughout much funding, especially the case of Javi with Lendi. It's very, very peculiar on a way of managing communal resources in a community, in a building community. And how could we build the ideas on that sharing commons, sharing materials, sharing infrastructure and stuff, and how it could be successful. Because sometimes at first we talk about the commons and And you say, yeah, it's good, but everybody's going to take advantage of it, you know? Yes, we have to do that. You know, our platform in 2011 already established that you could pledge for money, you literally pledge for money, but there's a part in which you could pledge for non-monetary work, you know, part of volunteer, infrastructure, materials, and the commitment of that social impact also relates to creating and giving back material or throughout Creative Commons licensing. Every single project that it's been in Godeo has that commitment, and some of them have shared their comments. And there is a repository, over 750 documents, digital licensing, manuals, books, etc., based entirely in Commons. You know, and they're accessible from 1,200 projects that we've been passing by, 750 results with Creative Commons licensing. I think it's pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh.
Thanks for that. So we had planned to do a World Cafe, which kind of needs a critical mass of people to be able to do. And so what I'm thinking is we're going to maybe split into a couple of smaller groups to have a couple of rounds of conversations. I really want people to be able to listen to each other, to go into dialogue about some of this stuff. And so what I'm thinking is that maybe we can each split into a different group. And then I have a kind of series of questions, of provocations for the dialogue. And so after we do the first two kind of questions, we're going to mix and match. And then we'll have people go into other groups and kind of continue the conversation.
I love the mix and match thing, yeah. It's my thing.
So we're yeah. I mean, ideally, we'd have more people who want to come and join. If there's anybody here in the Sharing Cities area that wants to come and join the conversation around the SDGs, we can do it real quick. But otherwise, we can easily do it with just two smaller groups. But if we have more people, we can do three, and we can cycle around. So we're going to maybe just start forming some circles of chairs, and we can just bring a couple kind of right over in this corner, and then a couple back there, and then maybe a couple over here in the middle. And just groups of maybe 3 or 4 chairs maximum to be able to have the best conversation. And kind of the idea behind the format of the World Cafe is that really it is kind of replicating the idea of sitting around a table at a cafe and philosophizing about these ideas, to have a free-flowing conversation. And it can be, you can go around the circle, you can do some sort of a popcorn where everyone just kind of talks as they feel drawn, but we're also only going to be dedicating about 10 minutes at maximum to each question. And now I'm seeing we're going in a big circle, so actually if we want to form kind of tighter circles over in this corner towards me in the front, just to give some space, if you want to move over this way a little bit more. So maybe, just groups of 3 or 4 maximum. So if we want to come in, so we're going to come in close. If you want to close in the circle over here and maybe close in the circle back over there. But so one of the ideas is that, we do really want to make sure we're hearing from everybody. If anybody starts, there's some people that are naturally comfortable to speak a lot. And those of us that are natural like that, it's important for us to kind of remember and to provide space for other people to speak. And those that don't necessarily speak a lot in groups, this is an opportunity in a small group to maybe feel comfortable. So one thing that I'm actually hoping we can do as well is that one person from each group is going to stay there, and I'm hoping that as a group we can maybe take some visual notes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give some pens to each group and a piece of paper to work on. So we're just going to use the backside of these. I can actually kind of go. Well, I'll go on mic because I'm still on the camera. But I'm just going to pass one here, and we're just going to open it up and fold it so the inside. And I'll pass one into this group, and one over here as well. So we're going to do a couple different colors here. All right, so again, we're also pretty tight and it's kind of loud in here, so we'll make sure that if you get in maybe a little bit closer and everything like that. And so like I said, we're going to kind of go through a few questions and give about 7 minutes for each one. If you really need more time, you can let me know and we can kind of stick with that. But otherwise, we'll try and go through. And so just as I was talking about the SDGs, kind of as a group, I'm hoping that you can share with each other kind of what your thoughts are about the SDGs. Do you feel like kind of previous UN or COP or other global targets are a beneficial tool? And do you feel like there's limitations from the SDGs? And if there's anybody at the table that is very knowledgeable about the SDGs and would like to kind of give a quick brief to other people at the table, feel free to do that. But otherwise, it's just kind of going to be an open conversation. Does everyone feel comfortable with that? Yeah. So about seven minutes. Kind of so again, the question. Yep. Yeah. So the question is kind of what are your thoughts about the Sustainable Development Goals as a whole? Like as the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN says. So what are your thoughts about them as a scheme, as a tool? Do you feel like it's something that could be effective? And thoughts about these types of kind of global commitments that have happened before, and if there's any just open feelings. So just kind of 7 minutes about open feelings about that. And again, if anybody else wants to come and join us for these conversations, we're just getting going, and there's another seat up here if you want to come. So what I'm going to ask now is that the person that was taking notes at the table, I'd ask them to stay, and everybody else can get up and move around to another seat. We're just going to move around, just go to another spot, so new circle. So if you were taking notes, just if you would stay where you were, and everybody else just come around. And again, we're going to do about another 7 minutes. Yeah, you're welcome. The what? Oh yeah, you can have the brochure. All right, if anybody was standing on the edges wanting to jump in and be part of this conversation about the sharing cities, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we're just doing a new round of conversations, so you're welcome to come and join us and take a seat. So, yep. Great. Okay, so the next round, yep. You good? You good? Okay. So the next round of kind of questions that we're going to tackle as a group. Wait. So the next round of questions that we're going to tackle as a group is I want to just kind of find out if you feel like, or if you know personally about the city that you live in, if you know that if your city has made any sort of commitments to the SDGs, and if you don't know, if there's anything that you would want to know about, from other cities about, that process or anything else like that. So this is just kind of a conversation about cities that have already made some sort of a commitment or are taking some amount of steps towards meeting the SDGs, and also wondering, how has it been received by people within the city, by organizations that are there, by businesses, anything else like that. So has your city taken any steps or announced that they're planning on, and how has the reception been? And again, we've got about 7 minutes for this conversation. So try and keep your answers and succinct, All right, I'm just going to give a 1 minute warning, for this round. All right, so we're going to get up and we're going to move around one more time. And again, our note keepers, I know, you want to stay, but we got to move around one more spot. We're just going to redistribute and then continue the conversations afterwards, but we only have about 10 more minutes for this space. So we're going to go around one more circle. And I think we've got just enough people to have about 3 people at each group. And if you are just walking up and wondering what we're doing, we're talking about sharing cities and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, looking at the ways that various community initiatives can meet the SDGs, and oftentimes at a much lower cost and more efficiently than starting new initiatives. So we're going to have one more kind of group discussion round, and then we're going to close up as a group. So. Yeah, I haven't said the question yet. I'm waiting. I haven't said the question. I'm waiting until people come and sit in their new seats so they're not distracted. For this final question, and again, we only have about 7 minutes, so we've got about 7 minutes per group, so 7 people. So again, it's not very long, but we can continue the conversation afterwards. The question here, or the prompt here, is what resources, tools, or support do you think would be helpful to better communicate the benefit of your work towards meeting the UN, the SDGs? So whatever your work is, towards meeting a specific goal or the SDGs in general, to your city or national government. So what kind of tools, resources, what would help you to be able to communicate what you're doing as it is aligned with the SDGs? All right, we're gonna kind of come back together as a group. So if we want to just kind of move the seats back, so we can either be in more of a clump, it can be amorphous, doesn't have to be all the way facing back towards us, but we can bring everybody back together as a group. All right, can we circle back a little bit? We're going to come back as a group. All right, so we just have 2 minutes to wrap up, and there was some controversy towards the end, which I actually want to just hear from folks about just real quick. While we're finishing up, if anybody's interested in joining Shareable's newsletter that isn't already signed up, I'm just going to pass this down through. And again, you don't have to sign up if you don't. If you're already signed up, it's fine. But if you'd like to join our newsletter, please do. So as we went through, I'm wondering, and again, we just have about 2 or 3 minutes for final reflections on this. So I'm wondering if anything came up for anybody, something that you learned or something that was spurred that was some sort of an idea that you're going to kind of take back with you or kind of made you kind of rethink about your approach or your project in any way. Anybody have any thoughts they'd like to share? Yeah.
Okay. This thing we were just talking about, it's the main issue about this whole conversation for me. It's like, what are we understanding as development, or what's sustainable, or where do we want to do, and what these goals, what do they align to, and which interests and what's behind that. For me, like, if we don't understand that and we don't agree in that, there's no even, like, it doesn't make sense to keep talking about the whole thing. So I think that's a really important conversation and talk to have.
So that kind of conflict between growth as a concept and the potential need for degrowth across the board, and how do those things all line up, was one of the things, just as a preface for that, for those that weren't in that conversation. Anybody else have something that came up for them, or something that was kind of spurred in your mind, or some sort of a connection that you are excited to potentially make that you hadn't been talking about before or thinking about? No?
No, there's something that appeared in the group that the different persons participating from different places. When was the first question about limitations, approach, or background, sometimes it's more disconnected. There was a disconnection between the SDGs and a general context of information. So how could it be achievable? Was a human being, normal citizen says, "Oh, that's too big," or there was a moment of which any small action counts. Which is the sort of place. There's a lot of measurement, awareness, or assumptions. How could we do a versus? Like, if we measure how strict we could be, the awareness that we create in society, or what do we fight back against assumptions? And what kind of actions you could actually take on that. And there was after more debate, but.
Thank you.
No, I think you some. No, I was talking about the attitude, because I think that we need to. We don't have to wait for a change. We need to act, because it starts from us, from the citizen. For me, it's very important, the empowerment. Let's stop to analyze and start acting.
Well, about in the group, many people talked about that it's good to have a long-term vision. It's essential, but there is a great emergency, and we don't know how to address this emergency. So yeah, well, that was one more question, let's say. Then I don't know, like, well, we're talking also about transversal approach, and we were talking a lot about how to raise awareness other than communication. Communication is good, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
And well, to finish, we had some kind of, how to say, like we started a discussion that could have lasted forever about the relation between SDG goals and degrowth, maybe. Well, so.
Great. Well, we're going to make all these notes available. There was notes being taken on the shared pad. Also going to take pictures of the notepads, and I'll tweet those out. I'm at Shareable Tom on Twitter. But we can maybe see if we can load those up to the pad as well. I'm not sure if pictures can go there. We'll find that out. But I'll be tweeting at it at Shareable Tom, or you can find me at shareable.net. If anybody is interested in getting a physical copy of the book, I've got books for sale. And then also at 4:30, I'm going to be meeting up over here. I'm going to be tabling. But if anybody wants to come and join me, I would use some help. And at 4:30, I was going to meet up with people here and head over into the main hall. And right before the final talk about kind of the right to the city, was going to put one of these free downloads for the digital version of our book on every single seat, or as many seats as I can, depending on who shows up. So a little bit of guerrilla marketing. So if anybody wants to join and help out Shareable and help distribute this idea around sharing cities, and get this into the kind of the larger conversation going on here, and leave this be the final thing that someone takes away with them as they leave the conference, 4:30 in the Agora. So thank you all. And if anybody wants to continue the conversation, I'm going to just kind of move back towards the back.